One of the first things that you need to do when you're accessing your online virtual system is something that's very counterintuitive. You need to log out. And right now, I am logged in with my Gmail account. So each of you were assigned this last session. You were assigned a login for myuvi.net. I think Kalai, you were number, was it Kalai was 1 and Rex was 2, or let's see.
Yeah, I was number 1.
Kalai was 1, Rex was 2, Amaya was 3, Asil was 4, and Roberto was 5. And I took 6. And basically this character is an L, and that's a capital RA for remote access. And then that's followed by your student ID number. That's your password. Domain account was created with your first initial and your last name, along with the remote access account that works through remote desktop in the Google Gmail environment. So one of the first and most common misfires that occurs is a simple case where, I'm going to go ahead and start closing these. Somebody is logged in with their Gmail. And if you happen to use remote desktop, or you happen to cache other passwords or other credentials in your own personal Gmail account, this creates all sorts of problems when you're using the other Gmail account. Now you're saying, well, wait a minute, that's not a Gmail account. Yes, it is actually. This is brokered through the university for a domain name called myuvi, and it's a Google account with a Google Drive and Google email and so on. However, it's centrally managed by the ITS department. So even though each of you were assigned, I'm going to use my own here. So even though each of you were assigned a remote desktop account, it's not the kind of account that you get to change or modify. You should never change the password that's associated with either the domain account, groovy.net account, or the myuvi.net account. Are there any questions about the restrictions associated with your remote access and your domain accounts?
Nope, understood.
Okay. So the first thing I need to do is log out. And I need to make sure that if I have any instances of I need to sign out. And one of the easiest ways to do this is to open a new tab. You'll notice that as you're closing tabs, it doesn't really give you an option to sign out here. You open a new one, and now I have another account symbol here I can click on and sign out. You need to cleanly sign out. Close all tabs. So if you have Google Chrome running with 57 tabs, and any one of them involves your own personal login, and you don't sign out, and or you don't close the rest of the tabs where you might be signed in. You can have multiple logins on multiple tabs. Everything gets confused. Google Chrome starts to get wonky and the stuff doesn't work like it's supposed to. But once you do that, you do get the option to continue here. Did I start recording? I'm just asking if...
Yeah, you did start recording, I believe.
Yeah, okay, we are recording. All right, good. So essentially, you're going to see me continue here, and I'm going to use the continue option instead of sign in again, because if I click sign in again, it's going to default to the TC Kentop Gmail account. I'm going to use another account. And in this case, I'm going to use csc.ra6 at myuvi.net. And then I'm going to enter my virtual RA with the @ and the lowercase l and the capital RA and my 9000 number. And what you'll notice is that a C should appear in the upper right corner, and you're likely to have this little icon in the taskbar. Can everybody see this?
Yes, we can see.
Now, if this does not appear, you can click into the address line and simply start typing remote desktop. And for that profile, what should happen is that remotedesktop.google.com should come up. And when you hit enter, it should take you to this screen where you choose remote access. And there you will find the name of your server running in the background. Now, for the two ladies in our course, I need you to let me finish this demo, and then I'll power your virtual systems on. Yours aren't active at the moment, but you'll notice that basically you can edit this. You shouldn't. You can change the PIN code. You shouldn't. You can delete it. If you notice other hosts in the mix, you need to let me know, but the only thing that should be seen is your server with your server name. I'm going to click on this. And if you see it's offline instead of online, you should take that screenshot. Your PIN code is going to be your student ID. So you're going to enter that. And what you'll see is the opening screen for your running server. So basically the system image was cloned, and then I created the names, but I haven't done the rest of what you need to do to complete the assignment. So once again, you're going to press Control-Alt-Delete to unlock, and to do that, you're going to expose or expand the right column. And you may have to scroll depending on the resolution, but you'll see press Control-Alt-Delete. And when you click this, you should notice your first initial and your last name. And you should be able to type in your same password that you used for the remote access account. When you log in, this screen should pop up, and you're going to close this one. And I want you to notice that it's going to appear, even though no server role has been established or deployed, it's going to show file and storage services here. It just hasn't been configured. So for your solution submission, if you were to basically say, oh, I set up file and storage services, if you don't have specifics about which part of file and storage services you configured, then that's not going to work. And you'll also see red here for local services and events. It's not really configured properly. What we want to do is click local server. And none of this works right unless it's properly activated. So one thing I did not do was activate your data center edition. That's something you need to do. And then time zone. So as you're joining the domain, you want to make sure your computer name up here is what it's supposed to be. You're likely going to need to change the Ethernet address to the assigned static address, because you have a temporary address that's assigned. And that's typical for a lot of environments. When you're first setting up a server, it'll take an automatically assigned or designated address until you're ready to figure out what you're going to do with it and what role you have. But a lot of functions and features, a lot of changes really don't engage properly unless it's activated. So our first order of business is to activate the key. Use the product key for the data center edition. And I'm going to copy and paste it, because I went to the trouble of loading it on here just to make things quicker for our demo. It's going to give you a short prompt saying you get the best experience free from interruptions. That's their way of saying it's not going to work right, and you're going to get frustrated if you don't activate your stuff properly. If you're connected on the internet, like you should be, it says we've activated this copy of Windows. What will happen, by the way, the product key that shows is not the same as the license key. And my license key works on my system and not on yours. So I've gone to a lot of trouble to make life interesting. You'll notice it says not activated, and if I refresh my screen, now there's a code that shows it's activated. At this point, it's really important to understand that being able to join a domain depends on a couple of critical dependencies. One is the time zone. The default setting for a server install is the West Coast, because all of the titans of the tech industry originate out of Silicon Valley, basically, and Microsoft is out of Seattle, Washington, north, but they have a branch office in Silicon Valley. And if it's Pacific time, when we try to connect to our domain servers to join the domain environment, the disconnect in time is going to prevent us from being able to do that properly. So another step you're going to take is to adjust the time zone. Now that's not the same as adjusting the time. A lot of people make the mistake of going in here and manually changing the time. You want to change the time zone. And after a moment, you'll notice you have a pull-down box, and the pull-down box halfway down lists Georgetown, La Paz, Manaus, that's in Brazil, and San Juan. San Juan is close enough to where we are. They don't have a listing for the US Virgin Islands. So we're going to say OK, and then OK. And you see here it still says Pacific. You're going to hit refresh, and now it says Georgetown, La Paz. I'm going to go ahead and change the IP address that's been designated for my server. I'm going to double click on the Ethernet interface and then click Properties. One thing you must be sure of is that IPv6 is disabled. You want to go into IPv4, and there's a couple of settings in here that are absolutely critical once this comes up. There we go. So for convenience sake, I went ahead and I also ran some of the updates on your system so that you wouldn't have, 12 hours of updates and patches and fixes to load on each of your systems. My IP address for my client server, Mercury, is going to be statically assigned to 146.226.249.66. And each of you have the designated assignment. So Sirius is on 6.1 with those same set of leading numbers, 146.226.249. STX Ryzen is on 6.2, Chiron on 6.3, Vega on 6.4, and Cepheus on 6.5. You'll notice here that I used a popular DNS server entry just to get things started, just to run updates for you. One important change you need to make is to fix the IP addresses for both domain controllers in the groovy.net domain. So you're going to put in 146.226. Come on now. 146.226.249.51. And the alternate DNS server is going to be 146.226.249.52. So we have two domain controllers. Because it's such a critical role, we don't want to have just a single system that's running it. So Polaris and another server are the two domain controllers. And whenever this system, my client, is looking to navigate the network, when I attempt to join the domain, if it doesn't first point to the domain controllers, it's going to say that you can't find the domain. And in some cases, you have to flush the DNS with ipconfig flush DNS just to get old entries out. I want you to click into advanced, and I want you to validate under the WinS tab that disable NetBIOS over TCP/IP is selected. We want to disable NetBIOS. It's a chatty network protocol. It's full of trash. It's vulnerable. It's not good to have in an enterprise or corporate environment. Strangely, in the territory, in the US Virgin Islands, a lot of people leave the default in place because it helps old printers and old resources connect. And that's bad practice in terms of security. I'd also like you to uncheck the enable LM hosts lookup, simply because that's another hack that allows people to make substitutions and you think you're going to Google and you're not. So we're going to click OK. And OK, and OK. And at some point, when our screen updates, we can close the rest of these windows. So you can see I've lost my connection with Mercury. And to get that back, I'm just going to click on Mercury and enter my PIN code. And I should get my screen right back. So that's one graceful way to recover in case you're separated from the mothership. So I'm going to go ahead and close this and close my connection and then refresh to make sure this changes. And you see it changes. You're going to want to change, you're going to want to engage this feature here, Windows Update. And when you submit your solution, you want to make sure that the date and time reflects the current. You want it to say today. You want to make sure that all of your updates have run. And again, I took the liberty of clearing most of them. The only thing that we should see may be the September cumulative update or Windows Defender update. And here you see Defender antivirus, and you see the cumulative update for .NET. So We want those to clear, and we want the screen to reflect today when you take a screenshot. Are there any questions about the expectation for these 4 criteria? The activation, the time zone, a current update status. Oh, now it's asking for a restart. So in general, whenever it's saying you need to restart, it's good to restart because, hello, some stuff may not work after something is posted. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to accept that and reboot this. If the virtual machine is working properly, it should be pretty quick. One consequence of clicking the restart button is that I'm going to lose my connection once again, right? So it's going to go ahead and start the restart. Your screen will freeze. If this happens to you, that's expected. I'm going to wait a moment, but usually virtual machines restart in a matter of seconds. So I'm going to go ahead and hold on. I may pause this for just a moment. So if all went well, I can press Control Alt Delete and then enter my. You're going to find out that sometimes you have to click into the box in order for it to take. I started typing, but it didn't take. The other thing is that you want to use a light touch and you want to type one character distinctly at a time. Across the Google remote desktop connection, if you go too fast or you're too rough with your keys, it interprets that as a repeated key, and yeah, it'll mess everything up. Notice I'm canceling a little pop-up. It's a nuisance issue. So if I click local server, this is the status that should be shown in the screenshot. The only other thing we need to do is join the domain. If our network settings point to the server, not only were you provided a local administrative account for your virtual system with your first initial and your last name, you were also provided with a domain account based on the same concept, first initial and last name, except that it's a domain account. It's not local to your system. When we click to join the domain, we'll have to restart the system one more time. But instead of seeing workgroup here, it'll say groovy.net. I'm going to click into that link and then change the option. And instead of workgroup, I'm going to insert capital letters GRUVI. If that doesn't work, I'll replace it with lowercase groovy.net. Everybody's experience varies depending on how they're connected. So I'm going to hit Groovy. It's going to say I can't see the Active Directory domain controller. So in this case, I'm going to use lowercase gruvi.net. It's going to give me a prompt. That means it found the domain. So try lowercase groovy.net first. I'm going to use my domain account. So instead of, you notice it says computer name and domain changes. I'm going to enter the name and the password of a domain account with permission to join the domain. So I'm going to put in my first initial and my last name. I'm also going to, let's see if we can go full screen here and might provide a little better clarity. Can everybody see that more clearly now? So I'm going to go ahead and click enter. And you should have the same result. Welcome to the groovy.net domain. If you find that your first initial and last name with the same password does not work, capture the screen and email it to me. But you should be able to do that. In fact, I'm guessing that when I finish this demo, if each of you do this right away, straight away, you should be able to, in just a matter of minutes, know whether or not that works. So I'm going to say OK. And it's going to say I have to restart the computer to apply these changes. And a very important step needs to be followed first thing once it reboots. So you would think, okay, I'm going to use my domain login when I first get on my system. You're not. I'm going to restart this. It'll break the connection once again. It's only until you have domain membership, a computer name that won't change, a static fixed IP address, proper licensing credentials, a good time zone with a time sync that matches the domain environment, the domain controllers. If you don't have all of that in place, all of those critical dependencies, DNS that points to the domain controllers, then what happens is that when you attempt to set up your role for the first time, there are plenty of misfires. So the fact that there are a lot of dependencies is actually a good thing. It means that a hacker that comes into a domain environment or a corporate network is going to try to set up his own email server or web server, and it's not going to work real well. Okay, the reboot should have already occurred in the virtual environment. If we get a prompt for a PIN code, that means it's active. I'll go full screen again. I just logged in with my local administrative account. I do not want to use the local administrative account most of the time. But if I click on my local server option, now I have the screenshot that I need for my submission. And the name of the computer and the IP address should match my previous submission for the previous assignment. And then all the rest of this should match. I should see a license code here instead of not activated. I should see Georgetown. I should see today, and all this together. So this is one of the screenshots that will satisfy 3 out of 4 criteria for your submission. Are there any questions about this part of your submission?
Nope, not at the moment. Everything seems clear.
I'm going to click on the dashboard. I could add a role right now, but if I add a role right now, I'm using my local administrator account. And what I want to do is use my domain account and create administrative privileges for my domain login on this server. What often happens in a domain or corporate environment is that user accounts, people come up on a screen and they log in, and it doesn't configure a user profile properly. So what I really want to, again, if you see this, just cancel it. What I want to do is open the control panel, and I want to scroll down to user accounts, and I want to manage user accounts, and I want to add a user. Now you'll notice the domain here is actually the name of the server. So it's not, these accounts only reside within the server before it was a member of the domain, when it was a standalone server. Those accounts are still active, and I'm actually logged in on this one. But I'm going to add the username tkentop, and the domain is going to be GRUVI. I'm going to hit next. I'm going to make this an administrator. Now you'll notice it's the Groovy domain with my domain login account that's going to be able to sign in, and that's critically important. So I have administrative privileges on the local machine, but through the domain account, the centrally managed account. So if I run into problems, if I use my local administrator account and there's some sort of password misfire and I manage to lock myself out, I'm pretty much screwed unless there's another local administrator that can reset my account. In the domain, if you're using a domain user account, you can get assistance and people back up for each other all the time. So now that this is established, if I go into manage user accounts, I'm not just going to see the local account. I should also see inside manage user accounts, I should also see, hello, hello. Eventually the screen will refresh and it'll show the Groovy /tkentop local, it'll say domain account administrator. In the interest of time, we're going to pretend that happened. It does show here. I want you to notice it's in the administrators group for the local server, which is a member server of the domain. It's a domain account for tkentop. Any questions on establishing this login? I'm going to click OK. I'm going to log out. And the first thing I'm going to do is log in with my domain account. You'll notice here it's showing tkentop, and I don't want this view, so I want to use another user. And when I hit other user, it's going to sign into GRUVI. It's going to assume that I'm using a domain account. Why? This is a domain server now. So when I type in tkentop, it's already pointed to the domain. I'm going to go ahead and log in for the first time. Using my domain account. I'll go ahead and clear that screen. The same images will show up. And at this point, I'm going to add a role. So if I click on local server, now that account will look different. Your full name would be in there. Same screen is true here. Nothing's changed there. Under the dashboard, I'm going to add a role. I'm going to go ahead and click next. This is a role-based feature-based installation. You should only see your server here, but you can manage other servers. I'm going to expand the file and storage services. If one of 12 is installed, that's not adequate. I'm going to open it up and expand it. And I'm going to select two roles, server for NFS, which is going to add other features. I'm going to add those features, and the file server role within file and iSCSI services within file and storage services. So now when I click next, instead of one of 12, it's going to show more. DFS is redundant distributed file service. That's when you cluster more than one file server. If two of you are interested in creating a clustered file server storage space, that's really cool, because if one of the servers is down, as long as the other server is going, people can keep working. That's one option. You could get together with your classmate and say, hey, let's do DFS replication or something like that. If you're interested in doing something like that for your role, please let me know about it. I could add other roles. In the interest of time, I'm not going to. It's always handy to have extra DNS servers around, because the internet DNS service is slow sometimes, and having more local DNS service makes your web browsing and your email responses much faster. So that's another popular role. It'll ask if other features need to be installed along with that role. I'm going to accept the defaults and click next. I'm going to select the box that says restart it if that's required, and say yes. I'll install. And when this is complete, you'll probably want to grab one of the screenshots. This progress bar will read installation is a success. And then when you minimize it, the results down here should change. Usually it only takes a couple of seconds on the virtual system. As soon as, all right, so installation succeeded on Mercury. This is one of the screenshots you want to capture. It would meet the requirements for the submission. It's always good to close this and then refresh. And then when you refresh, if you have another role that's installed, you'll see, like if I put in DNS, DNS would appear here, and then I'd have a green status on both of those. Are there any questions before we stop this? The other thing you're going to do is click here under notifications. It's always good to clear notifications. Sometimes they're not so benign, but here it's just a status update, installation succeeded, add roles and features. In some cases, it'll say you have to continue with configuration of your role. So there may be a prompt associated with the role that you selected. Any questions here on the last screenshot I need to capture for the Module 1 solution?
No.
Okay, we're going to stop recording.